Welcome and good morning, early birds. We are at the very beginning of the MSS LA County. We've got a lot to get through today, but our first panel, we are very much excited to be joined by Luis Arul-Doss, Chief Information Officer at the City of Ventura. We're joined by Shawn Kohrman, Deputy Chief Information Security Officer at Azusa Pacific University. We're very pleased to be joined by Ashwin Krishnan, Chief Diversity Amplifier at Mobile Matics, Richard Staynings, Chief Security Strategist at Silera, and Jeffery, Senior Solutions Architect at IBM. You're all very welcome. It's lovely to be back in LA. This is the first panel, so we got to treat people nicely. We can't go in too deep too quickly. We're trying to work out this top post holder, because when we're looking at the MSS, MSP, and end customer relationship, we'd very much like to think, well, who is going to be that linchpin? So perhaps if I start with you, Richard, and I work my way around. I know some people say stakeholder or instead of post holder. But let's get to the grips. We know who is the top post holder today.
Well, today the top post holder is the CISO, right? For any client organization, the Chief Information Security Officer, or sometimes the Chief Security Officer if they own physical security as well as information security. I think this particular role is evolving. It continues to evolve. It has done so over the last 15 years or more, and it's becoming more of an executive C-level position rather than a technical director of cybersecurity per se.
No, I like that, and you'll see perhaps a thread through today. We're sort of arguing that maybe the top post holder doesn't have the technical skills, but maybe that's not what is necessary. It is that administrative, that leadership role. Ashwin, let me come to you. Your role is slightly different. Maybe if you told everyone a little bit about your new hat, and then how that would reflect on this top post holder of today.
Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity, Phelim. So as Chief Diversity Amplifier at Mobile Matics, we're a small IT diversity supplier. So my job is to really focus on the diversity angle, focused on the CISO and the CDO, the Chief Diversity Officer. In my prior role at Secure Dynamics, I've hosted over 300 CISOs in conversations over podcasts and videocasts. I completely echo what Richard is saying. I think increasingly, in fact, there are certain things that kind of stick in my head. So one of the things that one of my guests said was, I hire anybody who's not a sociopath. So and it just kind of it sounds something that makes you want to kind of stop. But again, feel back to what you said. It's certainly come to a point where at least the ones that I've spoken to, they've expanded the aperture of who they want to bring into the organization and why.
And exactly. So it's no longer that sort of technical post holder, or is it? Is it perhaps the holy grail of the technical post holder who understands diversity, understands leadership, understands communicating with third parties? Luis, what do you think? Where could we go with this? Because are we expecting too much from this post holder? I think you're on mute, Luis.
Okay. The CISO is one of the critical position in any organization, I would say. I would equate to like a military general. I mean, you need a general to be more strategic, political, correct? You don't expect them to go in combat in hand-to-hand in the field. That will be infrastructure in the organization. But having said that nature, they should be reporting to the top dog in an organization. It could be a chief executive officer, it could be a board, or it could be an elected official. And I personally believe, being a CIO, it's not that I do not want that responsibility. I think it's a conflict of interest. It's like infrastructure, I'm in charge. Now I'm going to in charge for the security of that infrastructure. So how does it work?
I like that. Poacher turned gamekeeper, gamekeeper turned poacher. It's a perennial problem. There's that idea. Oh, I always want to be promoted. Yet, perhaps being this top infosec post holder is a place to essentially be scapegoated. I don't know. Eric, is that too strong, or what is the top post holder of today?
Yeah, and I think that the answer is there are many. That at the end of the day, the top post holder has to be a CEO or the CEO of an organization. I like the comment earlier about an elected official. Those people need to know what's going on. And let's look at the DNC hack in 2016. One could argue that Hillary Clinton, who was the head of the Democratic Party at the time, was ultimately responsible. If not her, then whoever was the head of the DNC was responsible. But that person is the one that oversees it all. And too often, this top post holder doesn't know technology, doesn't want to know technology, and they just push it down either to a CIO or now a CISO, and they're saying, hands off, I don't get it. I've been doing a presentation that is specifically about cybersecurity and business integration, and I'm saying that everybody in an organization has cyber responsibility. Everybody from literally the janitor that has a mobile phone connected to their Wi-Fi, all the way up to the CEO and everybody in the middle. Who's the top? It's always the CEO. It's always the top dog. The cybersecurity in our world, and again, politics, one could argue the president of the United States is the top post holder, and that individual has people below them that they need to delegate to, and they need to be briefed on what's happening. We all have to take responsibility, but at the end, it all boils up to the top. So yes, CISOs and CIOs and CTOs are critical, but ultimately it's who they report to is the top post holder.
Okay. So that's kind of fun, isn't it? We're elevating it to the CEO, just as the buck stops with the CFO in finance. What do you think, Shawn? Because surely this top post holder. Now, people might say, well, why are we so concerned with who this top post holder is? I guess we're looking at who's most responsible. And then in the context of this event, who is most responsible with dealing with these third parties? That's kind of why I guess we're looking for them, Shawn.
So it's interesting because I've heard of the idea of a CEO, I've heard the idea of a general, and I think both are very valid. But when you talk about the role of the CISO and the role that comes with that, part of what we need to think about too is where is the CISO role positioned within the organization? Does it report to the CIO? Does it report to the CEO? Does it report to the board? And what level of authority comes with that? Because when we talk about this general and we talk about the president and we talk about the CEO roles, what you're really getting into is accountability and responsibility. Kind of a racing model. So really, what goes where? And I've heard arguments for different reporting structures. But I think part of the problem we're seeing in the industry is the positioning of the CISO is a legacy thing that's still maturing. So the CISO was originally expected to be this top security expert. And now I think where we need to really transition it to is to change it to the role of a security evangelist almost, where the skill set is different, where it's more of a leadership, it's more of a how do we explain to people the necessity of security? How do we explain their part in it? How do we make it matter to them? So within my organization, one of the things I focus heavily on is demonstrating to our users why security matters to them personally. Because if they believe in it personally, they'll bring it to work. So that positioning, if that starts at the top, that sets the tone within the entire organization.
Yeah, Shawn, just to jump in on that, that is spot on. You have to have the leadership bring it down. It's like a coach. And if the coach wants to play a running game and the players want to do a passing game, you're going to have a real problem. So it needs to start at the top and it flows down through an organization. It includes cybersecurity awareness training. It includes delegation of responsibilities at the leadership level. And then all the leaders have to percolate it down, make sure that their people are doing the right thing. There was a recent breach with an organization, and I think that 27% of the people failed the phishing test. How in today's world do more than 1 in 4 people click on the wrong link? I mean, we all see it at home, and yet you still have organizations out there that are this uninformed about cybersecurity. And that's on the CEO. It is on the HR people. The chief people officer needs to be aware of cybersecurity and make sure that there is education for their folks. And from an MSSP perspective, when organizations bring in a partner, they need to make sure that those partners are vetted and that they are secure and that their people have training and that you now have a third party that has keys to your kingdom. How secure are they? How well trained is that organization? And what is that entity doing? What threat vectors do they bring into your company? So when these CTOs, CIOs, CEOs and bring on an MSSP, you have to understand that third party risk management, vendor risk management, and where that plays as well. So there's so much more to it. And that's why I like to just say it starts at the top.
Yeah,
so I'd
I
like
think
to add.
Sorry, go ahead,
Please
Shawn. Yeah.
No, go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say, Eric raises a very good point there, right? The organizations that have the most effective security are the ones that have established a culture of cybersecurity, and that culture needs to start
exactly
at the top, at the CEO level, and permeate throughout every level of the organization. It needs to be sponsored actively by the board and the CEO. And the CEO needs to be able to understand and spell cybersecurity. And I think we're in that transition mode right now where some CEOs plainly don't get it, right? It's this cybersecurity thing, it's technical, I don't understand it. Let's hire someone who can deal with that. And I'll give them an office at the end of the building and hopefully won't run into them very often. We can see that between those organizations that are able to defend against the types of cyber attacks that we're seeing today versus those that are falling flat on their face. And those that fall flat on their face are largely ones that lack that executive sponsorship and that executive understanding of cybersecurity as a function of business enterprise risk management.
I'd like to add on to that one. From my personal experience, a decade and quarter ago, I had an opportunity to choose my career path, whether it's going to be CIO path or CISO path. And luckily, the CIO was very supportive of me. She wants to offer me CISO position. She's interested in me taking over the position. And what I saw from my side, wait a minute, is she looking for a scapegoat? Something goes wrong that like she can blame and fire? Because that's a conflict of interest, right? Think about it. The CIO, right? If I have $1 million, I have an infrastructure here, I have like a software here, where I'm going to put that money? Because I need my stakeholders, business stakeholders. And then something goes wrong, I don't want to get fired. So I want my CISO, I have a man or a woman who's going to be in charge for this. And unfortunately, he's not doing his job. So we got to find another person. That's what it's going to be boiled down. So for that reason, I denied that opportunity, even though it's a very lucrative opportunity. It's a very good industry and a lot of demand. I denied that opportunity. I think that one reason made me to think this position cannot report to CIO. It has to be CEO or like above. So.
I need to add one incident that came to mind. I mean, Eric, you were talking about phishing, right? And this is something that, again, in one of my conversations, they're talking about this particular, I think it was CISO or deputy CISO, and she was preparing for a marathon, and she used to post her training pictures on Facebook. And so there was this white hat guy who wanted to kind of show that anybody can fall prey to phishing. And so he followed her along as she posted her training pictures. Day of event happens, she runs a marathon and then gets a link saying, hey, we captured pictures of your marathon, and she clicked and she fell, right? So the point being that everybody has their moment of weakness and everybody will fall prey to it. I think the point being is like, how do you kind of keep up with the training and get people more aware of what they're doing outside and therefore be more cognizant of this? It's not a one-time training and done and you got your badge of honor and you move on, right?
All right,
Yeah,
so
you talked about a culture of security, though. And the culture of security is really the critical aspect because that's what you're developing. I mean, when we talk about having our CEO conversant in security, that's really critical. I don't need them to be a security expert. I need them to be able to communicate to the organization the importance of it. So,
I like that. And Shawn, that plays into what you said before about the evangelist. Now, a little bit later today, we're going to be hearing from Eric Cron, who is an evangelist, right? And I don't see any reason why we can't have evangelists in the end user side, just as we have them on the solution provider and partner side. So bearing in mind, Shawn, that this event is trying to improve this MSP, MSS, end user, or if you want to be politically correct, and customer relationship, how can this top post holder that we're looking for have a better understanding of who they're dealing with, especially when they've been onboarding in the last 14 months, lots of people remotely? What is it that this top post holder is going to have to do to work better with these third parties?
So you're talking about contract management. You're talking about the vendor vetting process. Within our own organization, our vendor vetting process is onerous, to say the least, and our vendors hate it. But at the end of it, we have a very clear understanding of who we're doing business with, who their people are, what their skills are, what their belief and culture is internally. And it's worth the effort, as painful as it can be. It's absolutely worth the effort to have a very good understanding of who you're partnering with. Along with that, though, is contract management and contract vetting. And there is the CIO, and myself and the CTO are all involved in all contracts involved technology. We review every single one to make sure that liability and indemnification and other things are addressed appropriately, so that should the worst case scenario happen, we have a fallback on a legal side.
And well, that's the thing. And then when we talk to our MSPs and MSS players later today, then that debate about, oh, is insurance and legal there just to smooth the cracks, or are we actually going to take things seriously? Because we have an MSP that will speak later today. Now I can't name names, but they've spoken before, and they evangelized the use of the insurance as well. We're not going to secure everything. We just got insurance. So I don't know. It's a tricky one. Richard, I'm eager to get to grips with this top post holder some more. Is it fair to say that the top post holder is lacking technical skills? And if that's true, does that matter? I think you're on mute, Richard.
The joys of technology. I think the top post holder, it could be a variety of different people, right? I mean, if we look at the role of CISO historically, it was the manager of cybersecurity, right? This was probably the person that started out configuring firewalls, and maybe did that until fairly recently, until they got absorbed with management management tasks. I think there's an evolution of the role. It has plainly evolved over the last 15 years. And I think it continues to evolve, and at an ever increasing rate. It's now one of really a person that understands the technologies, the security technologies, and is conversant with them, not necessarily someone who is going to configure a firewall or write rules or conduct pen testing or anything like that today anyway. But it's someone that can translate cybersecurity technology risks to business enterprise risks, represent those to the board, and be the right hand of the CEO in a successful organization, right? If I'm the CEO of a company, I want a damn good cybersecurity leader in my organization, preferably a CISO, right? I want to make sure that he or she has put in place a very good team with some very good cybersecurity controls. Or if it's being outsourced, then very good partners in that particular space that I can rely upon to save my reputation, and to ensure that the company that I have been entrusted to lead is adequately secured. I don't think we're quite there yet across all organizations. Some are plainly better than others, and as I said earlier, you can look at certain organizations that are being breached, and you can say, oh, I know why they were breached, right? They didn't have a CISO. They've been trying to hire one for the last 3 months, and plainly aren't offering enough money, for that particular post holder, or, they've outsourced their cybersecurity to XYZ company that doesn't have necessarily good capabilities in that space, right? It's an evolving challenge, shall we say.
I think Richard makes a good point that we're further than we were. And you look at somebody like me, I've been doing this for 30 years. Well, 15 years ago, there weren't people with the experience and the tenure to be a CISO. And now that, we've matured as professionals and the need for the CISO has matured, we're starting to see CISOs show up on this true C-suite. Just because you're called the Chief Information Security Officer, if you report to the CTO, who reports to the CIO, who reports to the COO, everybody's a chief now. So you truly need the respect of what Richard is saying, is be the right hand of the CEO. So it is fair to say that you need to have some technical acumen. I would argue quite a bit of technical acumen, and understand the legalities and the risk mitigation and what the business's needs are and what the controls are, and converse that to the CEO. And that's another reason why I think a lot of CISOs struggle, is they're either too business or they're too technical. You need the hybrid, and the CEO has to rely on that person. That still the CEO to me is the top post holder, but the right hand of a CISO that directly reports to the CEO is the sign to me of a mature organization.
I like it, Eric. Well, let's run with that. You know, Lewis, a hybrid person that has both this sort of skill sets. If you look at vendors out there that like going hunting for prospects, right? They love hunting for CISOs. And in my mind, I think, well, that's a bit unusual. They should really hunt for architects, because the CISO doesn't have time to do a load of vetting. They go to the architect and say, what do you think? So why do I say that? Because is that a sign that the CISO is not the best placed person to manage these vendor relationships on a day-to-day basis, that they're more administrative, and we should give maybe the architect the day-to-day communication with an MSS or something like that?
So my take on this one is based on where I'm preaching to my organization is CISO is like a hybrid, but the responsibility has to be different, right? Means hybrid in the sense, I agree with Eric on that. Like, yes, they need to have like a good technical acumen and understanding when we sit in a software evaluation or an infrastructure project or in any kind of technology project. And even in the business risk, when we're talking about, you should be able to sit at that level as an executive level and say, yes, that is an issue. I need one of my security analysts to be part of that. So he needs to know that technical acumen enough to understand where he needs eyes. That's one. The second part is like he also need to have the ability to communicate to the business folks. I mean, like CISO can talk to like a CTO and CIO, but if he goes and talks to CEO about all the lingos about technology that he has to factor in to make it secure, he already lost them. So he needs to show that business benefit. Like, for example, if your ransomware attacks your payroll system, you wouldn't be able to pay your employees. What are the impact that you will go through consequences? Well, immediately, well, I may lose my job. That's what the CEO's response would be, right? Then they say, okay, so that's what we're talking about here, right? So that kind of like a political and bureaucratic level of field play they need to have. So, but I don't expect the CISO to be hands-on doing anything, because the infrastructure team, which reports to CIO or CTO, may not allow him anyway, but he needs to have an implementation through them. But he needs to have the security analyst that could do the more technical thing. But in my opinion, they have to be hybrid. For example, a medium-scale organization like us, we outsourced our SOC. I mean, like, that's not an easy feat, because like, it's not hiring somebody who can provide me a software as a solution in the cloud. It's much more than that. This person, when I say SOC, they have keys to my kingdom. I need to know who this person is. I took my entire team to visit their site and see how they operate. It's just not a regular vendor evaluation process I can be comfortable with. So I would say like a CISO needs to know what needs to be done, and critical thinking is very, very important for all executive positions. So CISO needs to have both hybrid and highly critical thinking of anything, because he may encounter more than even a CIO will encounter.
Yeah, I want to build upon what Lewis just said there, that you know, it requires some unique skill sets, but at the end of the day, good security and good security leadership really relies upon good collaboration. I mean, there's a saying out there, it takes a village to raise a child, right? And I think it takes everyone in an organization in order to their participation to secure that organization, right? And that involves a successful CISO who can collaborate with legal and contracts, right, to make sure that that there are SOC 2 agreements in place, or the right to audit, you know, contractors on a regular basis, that they have good insurance, cyber risk insurance, but that is not a substitute for security. I'm not going to propose that. I know that's a subject that will come up later today. But that CISO needs to collaborate and coordinate with a very wide variety of people right the way across the organization. It's a C-level role today, right? And you know, it's not so much chief, it's collaboration. Quite frankly, the C stands for in my book anyway.
I like that.
That's a good point.
No, go on, Eric.
Yeah, I was just going to wrap up with this, just to say I love that. I think collaboration is a great way to put it. And then we talked about an evangelist, and honestly, we're all evangelists. Every participant here, everybody on this panel, everybody in cybersecurity, everybody period is an evangelist. And one of the things I've actually reading a book, it's called The Coming Cyber War by Mark Crudgington. He's a CISO in Houston, and the book is a primer. It's very, very high level. It's designed for executives and the board just to learn what cyber is. We all that are dealing with the boards and the executives need to understand this, to speak their language and to explain it the way they can understand it. So we all need to evangelize to the post holder, because at the end of the day, in my opinion, the top post holder is not capable of handling this without assistance, without guidance from individuals like the panelists and others that are here. We need to make sure that we are educating and creating an atmosphere that's going to permeate secure behavior.
I like this because this is maybe the topic, isn't it? Again, what are we doing this whole event for? We're trying to improve the end customer MSS MSP relationship. Yeah, we know that there's now a gray line between the MSS and the MSP, and we know that that is a fun topic we can deal with in a bit. But Ashwin, what do you think that today's CISO or top post really wants from, in terms of liability from its MSS or MSP players? Because if they're evangelizing security, yet working with all these third parties who have countless people bundled into them, white labeled into them, what do you think today's top post holder is going to demand of the MSS or secure MSP?
No, it's a great question. I think I was picking back what Luis was saying, which is the visit to the site to understand what the third party does. But the thing in my mind is it's much like DevSecOps. This is like a DevSec partner ops in some sense, right? Because it's not a one and done thing. You could go and evaluate them today, but they could have an M&A tomorrow. They could outsource their thing to a third party. So I think it's an ongoing thing. And I don't think that has really been factored in, right? Because again, according to the CEO, it's like, hey, have you done an assessment of your third party? Yes, it's done yesterday, but the world changed today. And I think there has to be a process put in place to be able to get that visibility. And that goes back to relationship and understanding who it is on the other side who are able to raise their hands. And clearly, I mean, you can't have a conversation without SolarWinds. But the point being, I think the nature of what it is, and especially some of these engagements that have been going on for years, I think the hardest part is to get rid of one and put in somebody else in place, right? So in some sense, I think that to your point, Phelim, I mean, even if let's say the risk has gone up because what you evaluated yesterday has changed today, the question is, what do you do about it, right? Do you just flag that to the board? Do you just tell your exec team, hey, our risk went up by 2 percentage points because now we have a different fourth party because our third party has changed their outsourcing manufacturer? And what do you do about it, right? So I think in some sense, I don't think that question has really been answered, saying, hey, when you moved from point A to point B and you're outsourcing component X, this is what our risk is, but then how do you keep up with that ongoing? So I don't think there is, I haven't had a decent enough answer to that, which is how do you assess ongoing risk and what actions can you take?
And you bring up fourth and fifth party risk, which is kind of good, very, very timely. Later on today, Ali Pabrai is going to do a CMMC talk. CMMC is the classic example of fourth and fifth party risk that you just have no clue about, or maybe you currently don't have a clue about, but hopefully soon. And you make a great point. If you onboard somebody today, what about tomorrow? They end up doing something that is, let's say, not desirable. How do you get that on rolling thing? Shawn, what then would you expect from a third party? Do you expect security bundled as standard, or do you expect to pay a premium for it? And then to Ashwin's point, how can you allocate risk? Because otherwise, the CISO of tomorrow is just going to get fired every time there's another SolarWinds. But it's not really their fault unless they allowed sideways side channel attacks or whatever. But you know what I mean? How do you want your third party to look?
Well, I mean, it's a tough conversation because really what you're driving into is the marriage of your risk management practice with your contract management practice, with your vendor review and your vendor vetting processes. And really at the end of the day, what am I looking for? I'm looking for a vendor that is employing best practices within their own organization, and I'm looking for their ability to demonstrate it. So, we use a survey process to do that. But I need them to be able to show me what security controls do you follow? What certifications have you achieved or are pursuing? Are you, following the ISO standards? Are you following, any of the NIST standards? And how can you demonstrate your attestation or your compliance with those? So, but internally within the organization, there must be a process by which your risk management, your cyber risk, your legal team are all working together as a team to evaluate these partnerships that you're getting into. Because too often it's one party, the CIO or the CISO or the security architect, going out there and saying, oh, hey, that's a great product. I'm going to go ahead and sign a contract with them and bring them in, without a full vetting process by these other parts of the organization that bring value and share the internal liability. Because if you're coming at it from a team-based approach, saying, my legal team has looked at this, my risk management has looked at this, my vendor vetting process has looked at this, my IT team has looked at this, and we're all in agreement that this is a partnership worth proceeding with. If that has happened, great. Now, if something goes sideways, which it invariably will, going back to SolarWinds, the risk going back to just the CISO or just another party isn't there, or at least it's somewhat mitigated, because everybody had fingers on this. So you run the risk, though, with doing that, of creating a very onerous process that takes 6 months to a year to complete. So you've got to find a balance there.
And I imagine the public sector would be a good example of where, decision by committee would make everything take a long time. Yeah. Louis, not to single you out, but public sector, cities, is that an accurate reflection? Do people make decisions by committee? Is that how it works?
It's as explained, it's a thoroughly vetted process. We start with the legal, then goes to the risk management, correct? And then usually it starts with a bid or RFP and all of those. Once we define what is our scope, what are we looking for, once we get it, when we draft a contract with a vendor, the vetting process is extensive, as he mentioned, and we have to go through our risk management, we have to go through our legal, and then we have to go through our procurement process again. We have to go through our financial, so because we need to make sure that it's going to clear the financial audit if it's anything involved. So the vetting process is extensive. And then there's also a city manager's office or a county executive office. They are involved. So it's typically, it takes an average of, depending on the organization, 30 to 60 business days to get to the council or the board for final contract approval. So there's a thorough vetting process on this. And some organizations even vet the vendors ahead of time. They can't even, even in our organization, they cannot even bid or RFP for anything unless they go through this extensive qualification process to become a vendor for the city. So of course, sometimes we do have out of need, we have to go out of the line, but still we need to go through the legal, risk management, all those vetting process. It's a committee actually, end of the day.
Which is probably a good reason for partnering with a third party that then themselves can bundle things, because they're the prime contractor, and then they worry about everything that's white labeled. I guess conscious of time, Richard. I know you're traveling today as well, so thank you for joining us. What then does this mean? What are your hopes for today's Los Angeles County event? Because I know LA County is very broad, very big, very diverse. What would you hope we got out of today?
I would hope that we've established that the security leadership role is changing, and that it is more of a business role than it has been ever before, and that leadership relies upon a solid team of individuals and also partners that can contribute to security. And Shawn mentioned partners several times there, and I think that's critical, right? Whoever you are partnering with from an MSP, MSSP perspective, they need to understand your business. They need to understand the nuances of what is important to you, what is critical to you, and how things work, right? And they need to be the right-hand man or right-hand woman, essentially, of that CISO, just as the CISO is the right hand of the CEO in managing risk, right? If you outsource and sign the contract and forget, about the partner that's managing your SOC, or managing your incident response, or some other part of cybersecurity. You don't have that relationship there that you can draw upon when things inevitably hit the fan. So that is critical. And I think one other point I want to make here is that you really need to know the business. There is no point of you outsourcing your critical infrastructure industry to an MSP or another partner that doesn't understand your business, right? So, for example, I mean, I do extensive work in the healthcare space. I've been working in healthcare for 20 plus years. You cannot disconnect a rogue medical device on a healthcare network because it's infected with malware, because that may be keeping a patient alive, right? Similarly, in a gas pipeline, for example, you can't shut off a SCADA device because it's exposed to the internet, because you could overpressurize a pipeline and blow it up, or you could cause other similar damage, including depriving people of their gasoline for their pickup trucks, in the southeast of the country, for example. So there are things that need to be considered there.
I like it, and I'm conscious I need to wrap things up. But Ashwin, just because your new job title is so interesting to me, could you just tell everyone why diversity might have a really good role here?
Okay, so nothing like a story. So this is one of my guests from last week. He's been a 21-year CISO at one of the largest companies. He's giving this example to me, and for me, it just kind of hit home to answer your question. And it was really an individual in his organization who used to actually have a physical visceral reaction when he sees these tube lights in the office. So what he does, he works with with the chief facilities officer, and they go around the entire building with this individual on his team. And they identify all the lights that actually caused him, and they went and actually changed the frequency, the lighting itself, until he was comfortable. Guess what happened after that, right? Zero attrition for the next 15 months. They were able to actually hire people through referrals. So suddenly you're talking about an organization where we have cybersecurity skills gap. You're talking about these big resource constraints, and through this quote unquote small gesture, what he ended up doing was make it a more inclusive organization, and had essentially people want to be part of his organization. So again, to answer your point, I think it's something that isn't talked about as often, which is, okay, how do we ensure people want to stay, give them a welcoming place where they feel that they are respected. And in this case, they ended up becoming kind of the poster child for how do you build an organization that is inclusive and sustaining.
I like it. Well, I just had to take that opportunity because I know we're looking at the top post order tomorrow, but because we have Ashwin here, I thought I had to ask, because I think that's a really important aspect. But now we are over time. And please give our fantastic panel a great virtual round of applause. Thank you to Lewis, Shawn, Eric, Ashwin, and Richard. It's been a pleasure having you on. I hope to see you in the audience throughout the day. But yes, thank you very much. We've already got clapping in the audience as well.
Thank you, boys.